So yes, if you tell yourself all the time that you're worthless or you're ugly or you're stupid or really any of those like negative things that you say to yourself, your brain doesn't know the difference between what's true and what's not true. Jillian Michaels recently participated on an episode of Jubilee against the body positivity movement. And as a licensed counselor for more than 10 years, as well as someone who's lost over 40 pounds naturally in a healthy way over the last 6 years, I feel like I have a unique perspective on this situation. And so today, I want to react to some of the topics and conversations that were had with Jillian and the participants in that Jubilee video. So a quick disclaimer just before we get started, because I want to make sure that people understand I recognize that this is an extremely sensitive topic, and I'm going to do my very best to be as sensitive as I can. And please know that this is not coming from a place of judgment or me trying to like be controversial. That's not the goal here. My goal really is to just have a genuine and honest conversation about things that I think are really important. And I'm a little nervous that people are going to misrepresent my heart on this one, but all I can give is this disclaimer and hope that you guys see my heart for what it is. Okay, enough platitudes. Let's get started.
I'm going to do my best to not use the O word because I find it pretty offensive. So I'm going to use fat-bodied as we talk.
Okay.
Do you understand why people find it harmful and triggering?
Overweight and obese is literally just having too much body fat. It has nothing to do with the quality of the person.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
So first things first, I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious from your perspective. She says that obesity and overweight, she calls them the word, I'm not sure exactly which one she's referring to, are more offensive than fat-bodied. I'm genuinely curious from your perspective, because to me, the term fat-bodied, or there's later some discourse about using and reclaiming the word fat, which is, fine. At the end of the day, they are just words. But I'm genuinely curious from your perspective if you prefer obese and overweight to fat-bodied or fat or whatever the case may be. I'm just genuinely curious. Like, honestly, I think we all need to mind our own business personally in describing people. But, that's a different discourse. But the point being is that I'm just genuinely curious from your perspective, because when I was, heavier, when I was overweight, certainly for me, I think I personally prefer, and typically the verbiage that I use here in order to be more sensitive is what I would consider the more clinical version, which would be overweight or obese. But I'm genuinely curious just from your perspective, which you prefer and kind of how you feel about like the terminology around it. But the other thing that's really interesting that Jillian brings up from the front, and I think this is really important going in and very nuanced, is the notion of your having excess body fat is not a determination of your worth and of your value. And I think that's really important messaging just overall. I think one of the challenges and problems for Jillian is that she has a tendency, respectfully, to come off a little like harsh and kind of snarky. And I think because of that, a lot of like her good intended messages can get lost. And so because of that, I think that is a valid and fair point. I think the challenge comes when you think about like, because as a person who has lived that life, like I very vividly remember feeling a lot of guilt and shame and really struggling with my body and feeling like I wasn't good enough or doing a good enough job, when I was trying to like lose weight and get fit and healthy. And I think it's really difficult to disconnect your identity of like what your body looks like with who you are as a person. And I don't know whose fault that is. It's a larger societal issue, right? But at the end of the day, like I sort of had to like sort of take this mindset of like, it's really none of my business what other people think of me. And I think that, for me at least, I feel like it was very difficult for me and it took me a long time. And I mean bodies at every size, to disconnect what my body looks like from my identity as a person, whether that be this version of me that you see or the 40-pound version of me, the extra, not 40 pounds, the extra 40-pound version of me. And so, for me, it's such a hard thing to disconnect. And I really do think that takes a lot of like where I am now comes from knowing and recognizing my faith in Jesus and knowing that like my value and my worth is not rooted in me as a person. It's rooted in, the fact that I am born his child. And so like I am, my value comes through him and of him and by him and not in my own works alone. And I think that's just a different perspective, right? All right, let's keep going.
What I'm saying is that it is inherently unhealthy to live in a fat body.
It's inherently unhealthy to have excess body fat, yes.
Okay. Where are you getting that information from?
Oh, okay. There are dozens of MRT trials that show having excess body fat, dozens, is causal.
Okay, so sort of largely diving into her claim, and her claim is obesity is not healthy and pretending that it is puts lives at risk. And I want to spend a little bit of time with this because I feel like this is one of those things where I feel like there's a lot of misrepresentation that happens. And it's this idea of like healthy at every size has been taken and warped to make people believe that it is healthy to have excess body fat. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm a scientist. I mean, I am a scientist in my like therapy, but I'm not trying to pretend I'm a doctor. I haven't read all of the studies, in both directions, but anecdotally speaking, I will say that as someone who formerly had excess body fat to someone who has, less excess body fat, and very obviously anecdotal, but like for me personally, getting in better shape has absolutely improved my quality of life. I have better energy. I have the better ability to play with my son. I have more ability to move my body. I have strength. Like the being healthier has absolutely given my body, better quality of life. Now, with that in mind, I will say like excess body fat, there's again some nuance there because I know a lot of the BMI things have been largely debunked because there's no sort of initiation for muscle gain and things like that. Like, for example, the BMI says I'm supposed to weigh like 95 pounds. There's absolutely no way I could look like this if I weighed 95 pounds. I would never eat like anything. And so like I can recognize that that might be unrealistic, but I think for me, my point is that trying to tell people like that you shouldn't try to take care of your body does feel like a misrepresentation because what taking care of your body looks like might look different for other people. So, there's a lot of nuance in that, but I think it is a mistake to pretend, because I think that really is what it is, pretend for the sake of like people's feelings that it can't do you harm to have a lot of excess body fat when there is some significant bodies of research that show us that. And again, my sort of anecdotal note about like how much better I truly feel. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk. This genuinely just the way that I feel.
Studies show that if you're very, 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 very thin or your body is very, 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 very big, it is more difficult to be healthy. That is absolutely
But
true.
then you agree with me on this point.
I don't, because I don't think body positivity is the dangerous thing. I think hatred of fat bodies and people hating themselves and people living in self-loathing because they've been taught that their body is the wrong shape, that's the danger.
Both can be true at once. So let's look at this, right? So
Okay.
first thing,
Okay, in this particular case, I think Jillian kind of said it perfectly. I think two things can absolutely be true at the same time. And I think this is one of the things that gets misrepresented and largely one of the biggest challenges with like a short form content in particular, because this truly is such a nuanced topic and everyone has different perspectives and opinions on it and different life experiences and things like that. But, it is harmful, absolutely, to hate your body and tell yourself you're worthless and make yourself feel bad, right? But you can also love your body and know that you need to take better care of it. And I would argue that because you love your body is why you take care of it. And again, what take care of it looks like might look different for different people. But what I'm referring to is eating whole, healthy foods, moving your body, building muscle for bone density and overall health. These are the things that I mean. I mean, from like a health and longevity perspective, I don't give a crap about, any of the sort of like aesthetic stuff. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having aesthetic goals. I definitely had aesthetic goals, when I got started. And I certainly, from a personal experience, definitely, if you never watched my video about my weight loss journey, I'll link it here. But, I had a lot of guilt and shame. A lot of my guilt and shame was really more around like motherhood and things like that. But a significant amount of my like weight gain did come in a postpartum period where I was dealing with a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety. And, I truly I felt like a failure as a person. And so, my body was a kind of a reflection of that, but I also wasn't taking care of myself because I didn't feel like I was worthy to take care of myself. And so I think there is a really big mindset shift that does need to happen. And we'll get into this a little bit more later. But, unfortunately, your brain, biologically speaking, only knows the information that you give it. So yes, if you tell yourself all the time that you're worthless or you're ugly or you're stupid or really any of those like negative things that you say to yourself, your brain doesn't know the difference between what's true and what's not true, right? I give this example a fair amount. If somebody told you your entire life 1 + 1 is 5 and you never looked at any sort of other book, right? You'd go your whole life thinking 1 + 1 is 5. Just keep walking around, 1 + 1 is 5, right? And then somebody comes along and says like, hey, no, actually 1 + 1 is not 5. It's actually 2. And you'd be like, what? Excuse me? It's the same thing, right? Your brain, it's not the exact same thing, but you understand my point. So your brain doesn't know the difference because that's what you learned. And so when you teach yourself, I'm worthless, I'm ugly, I'm, fat or whatever the verbiage is that you want to use, right? When you teach yourself that, that's what you know. And that's what your brain learns to be true about you. As opposed to if you say to yourself, I'm a person who takes care of my body, or I am, beautifully, wonderfully made. I am who I'm supposed to be. I take care of my body. Your brain can and does neurologically adapt to that learning. It's the whole premise of cognitive behavioral therapy is the ability for us to modify and change the neural pathways in our brain. And the problem and challenge comes is that we have to repeat over and over again. It's not just a simple like, oh, hey, wait, suddenly everything is peachy keen. We call it the fake it till you make it. And so often it looks like me acting as if I believe that way, even if I don't believe it until I do. And you do that by building the healthy habits and taking care of yourself. But I think I don't think that one is necessarily like good and the other is bad. I agree with Jillian and I think two things can be true at the same time.
Okay. I have a friend that's on the inside. He sent me this. He goes, I just want to show you the ways in which this is being in the inside of I can't say that a big food company. You got it.
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Okay. So here's the intentional message overlap, right? So healthy at every size. Quote, you can be healthy in any size. Corporate benefit. Removes health concern barrier to sales. Stay with me, okay? Dieting doesn't work. Protects snack foods from being cut. Healthy in any size. Weight and health are unrelated. Corporate benefit. Deflects from products causing obesity.
Okay, so this sort of leads me into a twofold discussion. One of them being about like advertising and things like that. This is something I've wanted to discuss for a while. It's really interesting to me, and I see this especially on like the Instagram. I'm not on TikTok, but TikToks end up on Instagram, but I see it a lot in the advertising of things. And this is one of the things that sort of always confused me is like, why are we allowed to be lied to? Because I think, and a lot of the folks in this, I'm not going to show you every single clip, obviously, and not make you watch the whole thing, but a lot of the argument of many of these people is that like, I've tried to lose weight and everything has failed me. And to me, I can totally appreciate where that comes from, this place of like frustration of feeling like you've tried everything. And I largely blame a lot of that on advertising and baloney stuff that I see being advertised because like I see all the time advertisements for like juice cleanses and, fat burners and like all of these different things that don't actually do anything other than take your money. And they do that to prey on people and take advantage of it. And again, it's one of those things, I don't know whose fault that is, but like the fact that there are so many products and advertisements out there for things that don't work because the reality of it is that being healthy, right, taking care of your body is not sexy. There's nothing sexy about exercising and eating whole foods and taking steps and picking up a dumbbell. There's nothing sexy about it. And so but sexy is what sells. Right. And so I think, and I get really frustrated looking at it because I remember being one of those people. I remember being online and looking and trying to figure out like what's the best way to lose weight, right? You do the classic Google search, like what's the best way to lose weight? And finding like all this stuff, all these supplements, all these vitamins, all these this, all these that, like you got to do this or you got to do that. And like trying to figure out like what's actually true. And so I'm really thankful and grateful that I finally did figure out that the unsexy stuff is what works. And I'm extremely grateful for that because that is what works. But that's not what sells in these advertisements. And so I get really frustrated when I see all these people like pushing products and pushing baloney that doesn't work. Like I get pretty like pissed if I'm being honest with you because I remember being like that and I'm sure many of you have experienced this too where you're like I'm trying to be fit and healthy but I don't even know what to believe because there's just so much overwhelm. Like how do you figure out who you listen to? You got one person over here telling you Pilates is the way to lose weight, and you got somebody over here telling you that weightlifting is the way to lose weight. And then you have somebody telling you that calories don't count. And then you have the other person saying, like, yes, you should track your macros. Like, well, who do you believe? Right? You just sort of have to pick and hope for the best. And it's a very frustrating place to be. And so I honestly just kind of wonder, like, how do we like stop getting lied to? Like how does that happen? And, like, I genuinely am asking, like, I don't know how we stop getting lied to, because really in this situation, like, knowledge is power, and knowing what works and what doesn't work can help you to weed through it. But what about what you don't know? How do we get that knowledge? How do we start that train rolling so that people can like read through the nonsense? And that's honestly a lot of the goal of this channel here too, is like help you weed through it so you don't have to waste the time that I waste, even though I'm sure you've wasted plenty of time too. But hopefully that makes sense. And then, I think it just like speaks to like our culture of like Instagram and TikTok and just like a lot of, and I'm not trying to crap on short form content, like you do you. But I think the reality of it is that there's so much nuance in this that cannot be covered well in a short form way.
Resistance. I'm
Well, I mean,
telling you.
resistance of acknowledging or saying that it's actual, that it needs to be.
I think that there are absolutely, I think that intuitive eating is a goal, not a treatment plan. I think that having access to health, which is what Health at every size was initially intended to do, I think all those things are important. I think, unfortunately, the fact that the movement is decentralized, and it's prone to being co-opted, it can do harm in the ways that I have shown you.
But intuitive eating is such an interesting thing, because I would personally call myself now in the season that I'm in like an intuitive eater. But I think one of the things that gets misrepresented, and I, speak about this in the other part of like the short form content piece, is like, I think a lot of people do a disservice by pretending that you just know how much your body needs. But if you're someone like me who has struggled with like binge eating or maybe restricting, right? Your body cues are no longer connected the way that they're supposed to be for you to actually know when you're hungry and when you're full. And especially when you add emotional eating in, which is, a whole nother topic probably for another whole video. When you look at that, it's really easy to, sort of assume that these people just naturally know how to intuitively eat. And I don't like that people pretend that it is, because for so many, myself included, it really was a learned skill. And that's one of the reasons why I say, like, it is really important to track your macros, but you're not doing it from a place of shame. And again, I know that can be easier said than done. I'm not saying that it is, but when you track your macros from a place of learning and understanding, like, this is what my body needs and this is what I'm giving it, it really does have a huge impact on the way that you look at food, because it's amazing, like truly amazing. And I love the reels and stuff that I see where people are like, this is how many calories is in this little tiny thing. Like coffee creamer is a perfect example. Coffee creamer is the biggest load of malarkey, right? Like, cause like you can have like this much coffee creamer for like 40 calories. Unbeknownst to you, if you have no idea, you're not like looking into it, you can be eating and drinking like hundreds of calories and wondering why you're not losing weight. Well, it's because you had 200, calories worth of coffee creamer that probably didn't really even do anything for your coffee. And so it's stuff like that when you're looking at it and we're tracking it, it's way easier to see the bigger picture. And so there's some great dietitians that do a wonderful job of explaining and teaching you, because there is a place for eating intuitively, but you do have to understand how many calories things have. You do have to understand portion sizes, all those things before you can do that. Now, I'm not saying I'm not I'm not an eating disorder specialist. I don't pretend to be. I've taken some like nutrition classes in the realm of like therapy and stuff, but that's not my specialty. It's not my certification. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not. If you're in a place where you're trying to get healthy and you think that weight loss is a good idea for you, then that's really is where you need to consult with somebody first on a mental health side. And there's a large sort of overarching theme in this video about shame, and basically shame being worse than being overweight. And I think that, again, they can both be bad at the same time, because ultimately, at the end of the day, like, my goal here is for you to know that you're worthy and you matter and you were created with a purpose. And so, you are who you are and you were built the way that you were for a very specific reason. But because we love ourselves, we take care of our bodies. It's not in spite of that. It's because we love ourselves that we take care of our bodies. And when I'm talking about taking care of your body, I'm saying like eating whole foods, moving your body, respecting it and loving it. And I know that there can be a really big disconnect between the two at times, especially if you're made to feel like your body isn't worthy for whatever reason. And we could go into a whole other nuanced thing, but I don't want this video to be any longer than it already is. But I think it's really important, though, that we understand that taking care of our body is not a punishment. Exercise is not intended to be a punishment. And I also know, like, I heard some of the folks say about, like, well, exercise hurts me. And, like, I can totally appreciate that. I remember, I mean, exercise is intended to be difficult, but I can remember just how difficult it was for me to exercise when I was first starting to work out. Like, it was really hard, it was really, really difficult. But I think there's something about taking care of your body and learning that you can do hard things is an invaluable skill. It's an invaluable skill to know and look at something in the face and going like, you know what? That thing's tough, but I'm tougher. That thing's big, but I'm bigger. I can do this. And there's just something so powerful about being able to do that that I think you miss if you don't give yourself the opportunity. And I think for me, largely, that really is the whole purpose of, you know, why I do what I do, why I take care of my body is because I do love my body and I want to be able to fulfill my purpose in the world. And I can't do that if I can't take care of myself. And the reality of it is like life is about choose your hard, right? Because if you're not choosing the workout hard, you're choosing the other hard, which is potentially having to be in a nursing home or not being able to take care of yourself, or maybe even dying younger than you should have to and not being able to spend time with your family. Like these are big stakes. And that's part of the reason why I'm making this video is because I think it's really important. And I don't want to overlook it because I think it's an important conversation, even though I do, again, worry it's going to, some folks are going to misread my heart. But, I was going to do some more. I have like 10 other clips here, honestly, but I think that's enough for today's video. So if you love it here, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up. It lets YouTube know it's useful or helpful. And I'd love if you would subscribe and come and join the family because my goal here, like I said, really is to help you be the healthy, wonderful, strong woman that you are. So until next time, bye friends.